This is Back to Back.
Yo, what's up, back-to-backers? This is Willie Joy. Welcome to the show. This is Back to Back. This is my podcast. You already know the deal. Big week this week. I don't know why I just got stuck repeating that, but it's a big week. Masa is on the show. I know a lot of people are going to be excited for this one. I was excited to do it, man. I think he's one of the most creative producers that we have in electronic music right now, really pushing everything forward, and it was just a pleasure to talk to him. I'll tell you all about it in just a minute. Before I do, how's everybody doing? You doing all right out there? I hope everyone out there is doing well. I know it's been a heavy couple weeks in the music world. It's been hectic too. I know we're all busy out there. It's hard to find time for reflection when you're running around, hard to take care of yourself. So, hey, take care of yourself. Make sure to take a little time off, spend some time with some people that you like, maybe even some people that you love, do something fun. All the other bullshit can wait. Of course, I haven't been great about taking my own advice. It's been super hectic around here. We're setting up some really cool one-off things that I think you guys are going to be excited about. No details yet, but you will literally be the first person to know if you are listening to this podcast, because that's where it's all going to get announced. Stay tuned. Been working on a lot of new music, finishing a lot of that up. Hopefully you'll start hearing some of that again pretty soon. You know, not tomorrow, not next week, but pretty soon. I just got back from Seattle last weekend. Man, I love that city. Every single time I'm there, I love that city. And there's a bunch of places in the country that feel like this, but Seattle really feels like it has its own culture. Between the water, the climate, just the people there. I don't know what it is, but it's a beautiful city, beautiful people. Played a great show, and now I'm back home talking to you. If you'd like to talk to me some more, I am always available. backtobackpod@gmail.com is my email address, or you can hit me up at WillieJoy or at backtobackpod for whatever you want to talk about. Talk about the show. If there's another artist that you'd like to see appear on this show, put it out there. You never know. It might turn into a reality. And as long as we're talking, if you're enjoying this show, if you like what I'm doing over here at Back to Back, the best way you can support us is just tell a friend about this show. Make a post, send a tweet, retweet us. Just if you see somebody else you know who loves music, tell them to check it out. That is the best way to help this show grow. This is a community show. I really do this for everybody out there listening. And all of those messages of support and that love, it all comes back. I see it. It makes me feel great. And it really does help the show grow. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the show. That way you'll never miss an episode. Every Tuesday, I'll post up a new one, and it's just going to show up on your phone, your tablet, your two-way pager. I don't know how people listen to podcasts, but whatever it is, it's just going to be there waiting for you. You don't have to worry about it. Subscribe to the show. And if you want to go deeper, if you hear us talking today, you want to know more about the music we're mentioning, all you got to do is follow the Back to Bangers Spotify playlist, which is a list that I update every single week with brand new music from my guests, myself, and a lot of the music that we talk about in these conversations. So it's a great reference. You're going to go in there, you're going to hear an awesome mix of songs and styles. I think people really dig it. I have a great time putting it together. It's just cool, man. It's fun. I think a DJ's first skill should be the ability to put different sounds together, put them next to each other and connect them and make it make sense to other people. And that's what this is, man. It's just a cool collection of music. So the link to that is in the description of this episode. Go check out the playlist. All right, so for this conversation with Masa, we met up actually on his tour bus. He was on a little 2-3 week American tour. It was right before sound check. I think his team was a little worried about the time. I never want to stress anybody out if they're on a schedule, so of course I was a little uptight about it too. But once we started talking, man, that all melted away pretty much instantly. Despite never having met him before, we connected really fast. I felt like I was talking to a kindred spirit. And, he didn't have anything in particular he was trying to promote. We were just two guys who like music, having a conversation. I think that's when this podcast is at its best. I am, however, putting links in the description of this show where you can go find all of his music, all of his tour dates, everything. You definitely need to be following Masa. I've always been pretty blown away at how good his music is, but in this case, I was pretty blown away by how well-spoken, how intelligent the guy was. He's still young. He started super young. I got kind of focused on that in the conversation, trying to figure out what that was like. And it's fun to talk to somebody who's in that position because you realize the potential of what they could go on to do. They have so much more time to keep making cool shit, to keep innovating. And I think you can tell that's really what's important to him in this conversation. The evolution of it, the art of it, it's a pure thing when he talks about it, and I really dig that. And we went all over the map. We talked about everything, from his moments where he kind of intersected with the pop world, with the mainstream world a little more, to underground scenes, growing up on a tiny little island. It sounded insane, man. He was a great conversation. I really enjoyed it. I think you're going to enjoy it as well. I know I say that every time, but I mean, you're listening to the show. So, fuck it. I think you'll enjoy it. Let's get into it right now. This is me and Masa back to back. Let's go. First time on your brand new bus.
Yeah.
It's actually a pretty nice bus.
I've never seen a bus like this that's kind of decorated like a Victorian summer home.
It does kind of look like a granny bus in a way.
Yeah, I like that though. You need a bit of a homey vibe.
Yeah, no, I'm not mad at it even a little bit actually.
It's nice and tall at least. I've been on some buses where I've been crouched over like the Hunchback of Notre Dame, which isn't good.
How big is your crew at this point? I would imagine it must be sizable.
I mean, it's a bit different from like, say, a DJ touring crew where maybe you have lights and sound, but not much else because we have quite a lot of gear on stage. So it's like, I think it's like 8 or 9 people, and then maybe we have a photographer, videographer, something like that. So yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's pretty
10.
Reasonable.
Yeah.
Did you start as a live performer?
Yeah.
Okay.
That was like a super intentional thing.
To not start as a DJ.
Yeah, it wasn't out of any sort of disrespect for the art of DJing or anything, but I was like, I come from a live background and I was just like, if I want to make electronic music and like dance music, I want to like differentiate myself from that scene a little bit. But now I do lots of DJ gigs now. But it was just about that initial like setting myself up in that world.
Yeah, no, I think that's really smart, and I think it really paid off for you up to this point. It's just kind of rare, I think, when you're just starting off, and B, you were young when you started as well, to have that foresight even. I think it's kind of rare.
Yeah, I'd say it's the only important thing to me about this project is just having vision and just like knowing what you want to do and kind of facilitating it as best you can.
Yeah, I mean, and I think in a lot of different ways you do achieve that. I think despite the fact that you make a lot of different sounding music, it seems like there's this strong UK, vibe to everything. Mm-hmm. There's some through lines that run through everything. How do you find or do you change anything when you come over here or when you go to other countries? Does it always translate, culturally?
You mean like musically?
Yeah, because I think you more so than some artists from, similar backgrounds or similar areas, like it's the UK influence, I think, is strong. And I feel like sometimes, there's plenty of UK artists, and it's not just about the UK, but, anytime you have like a strong cultural stamp on what you do, sometimes some artists can have trouble breaking into other areas,
Yeah, I'd say I've been either lucky or smart or something, like, because America's my biggest market in terms of like ticket sales and like music streams and things like that. So there's obviously something about it that has a a sensibility to it that's kind of appealing.
Yeah.
I mean, my mum is from Indiana, so
okay.
was kind of raised semi-American, or like I was aware of the American attitude.
Sure,
like, growing
yeah.
up.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, if you're from Indiana, that's about as American as it gets, man.
It's the apple pie and Hoosiers and whatever.
Right. So how does a woman from Indiana end up in Guernsey, which we were talking about before we started recording?
Yeah,
Small island.
I think her mum grew up there, so that's how she knew about it. But I don't know. It's such a strange place, Guernsey, where I'm from. It's this tiny island that's off the coast of France. It's not French. It's not English exactly. It's just kind of its own little government. It's a tax haven, so it's like an offshore tax haven.
Right.
So like you're either local and poor, or you're from somewhere else and you're really rich.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I'm not sure how they ended up there, but I don't regret like being from such a small place. I think actually it's part of the reason that I managed to retain some sort of originality or like outsider view.
I'm sure that's true. I mean, my idea of, well, I've never grown up on a small island, but I know people who are from small towns or isolated areas, and as kids, it seems like either you really find a hobby, find some passion, or you just get into a lot of trouble, right? Like it seems like there's not a lot of other opportunities in those kind of situations.
That's right.
Which kind were you, or were you a little of both?
I mean, a bit of both. Guernsey's a really safe place. Like the crime rate is, I think it's like 0.1,
okay.
like 0.01. And like there was one murder there, like I think getting on 15 years ago now, and that was the last time somebody was killed there. And it still makes the pages of the press,
Right.
Like, there's no real crime over there. It's mostly vandalism and petty theft, things like that.
So it's well-behaved people.
Yeah, and there's no drugs over there. Like, the drug laws are extremely stringent. So what's left to do is like just drink. So
interesting.
we drank.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was there any culture, so to speak of, as far as youth culture, music culture, art? Like what would reach you there?
Not in the sort of exciting, visceral way that you might think, but yeah, it's such a microcosm that there's kind of these weird emergent scenes that happen. Like recently, there's a huge drum and bass scene happening there. Well, huge in the context. When I was growing up, it was punk and hardcore and like garage DIY stuff. And there's kind of an undercurrent of folk music, like being quite a country place.
Sure.
So yeah, well, in terms of music, it's that. But there's no club culture over there. There's like one nightclub that's open past midnight.
Right.
And it's really not a vibe. If you've ended up in there, then you've done something wrong.
You took a wrong turn.
Yeah.
Did you find that frustrating, or were you able to kind of just, the opportunities you didn't have, channel that into other areas for yourself?
Yeah, I'd say the latter more, just because like I didn't know otherwise. Like
right.
When I started making electronic music, I didn't really understand what it was sort of envisioned to be, which is sort of club music.
Yeah,
to start with.
Yeah, I mean, that must have been such an interesting filter to start making something that is eventually intended for a dance floor, which you just didn't have.
Which we didn't have access to, yeah. And I think a lot of that was the start of the SoundCloud scene, and like just having the internet was like my telescope onto culture, basically. And I think that still like influences my music a lot, just that sort of that filter of the internet and being able to pick up on a lot of different things distantly.
Right. Well, and it makes sense when you say that, to look at your body of work up to this point, which is a lot of different influences, a lot of elements that another person might not have put together on the same song. But, on the internet, you're right. All that shit is right next to each other.
I think of it more as like a curatorial thing, where it's like, it's almost my taste on display, like when I'm making music.
Yeah, like how, kids would have tumblers back in the day almost, right?
It kind of is like a Tumblr approach to music. Or like, I like the idea of we're in this age of amalgamation now, like everything's news feeds and there's lots of different sources, but it's all kind of being presented in this one context.
Sure, yeah, and you're right that people just sort of you find the feed that you like and that makes sense in your worldview rather than the specific information.
Yeah, I think my feed is like just as you say, like a lot of underground UK electronic music, and then like also just sort of the band influence, like the real instruments.
So you started off playing in bands?
Yeah, I was in like a lot of punk bands and just hardcore bands. I was actually at the same time as I was doing that, I was in like gospel groups as well. Okay. So it was like both sides of this weird. They're both spiritual in a way.
Oh, absolutely. Well, and if you look at, I was talking to Cascade about this, who's he's like kind of a religious guy and has a religious background. The roots of house music. I mean, there's a lot. If you look at those originators, super religious people, and a lot of sampling and the same like chord progressions.
Yeah,
it's interesting.
I just think a lot of that is like. Yeah, why do people make music? And it's like to try and tap into some sort of... And I'm not that guy who's like, yo, man, da, 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 da. It's all about higher energy. But like, there is something to be said about that kind of... I was playing... On Saturday, I'd be playing in a pub with a punk band, and on Sunday morning, I'd be in the church. Like, and I've since drifted away from the religion and that sort of thing. But having that experience of... playing music, not just to play it and not just to listen to, but to soundtrack someone's religious experience,
right,
is like a really big influence on what I do, I think.
Yeah, I think putting it in that context where it's not just, a catchy song, but it actually is part of the fabric of their lives.
Yeah. Or it serves as the soundtrack to someone's experience,
right?
And that's what DJing is really about. It's like it's as much about what is it? There's this great Bowie interview where he's like, it's from the 90s, and he's talking about the internet and like raves and stuff, and he's like, it's almost as if the audience and what they're doing is just as important as what the DJ is doing, and they only exist to sort of complement each other.
That's absolutely right. Wow, man. You kind of blew my mind, because that's obviously a quote from a legend, but that quote must have come from such a long time ago, and it's still so applicable to right now. On this show, I have this conversation all the time, especially if I'm talking to DJs or people in that realm of the DJ game has gotten so crazy now, and people are pre-planning the set. The whole thing is like much more scripted than when I started, and
it's like TV now.
Yeah, it is kind of in a way, and I'm not trying to be like the old man on the porch shouting at it, but it is just weird to me, because I think it is that relationship between the artist and the audience. And for me, that's where the magic happens, Yeah. You do the right thing at the right time, and the room kind of catches on fire for a second.
Reading the room. Yeah. It's kind of like, well, my prevailing attitude towards it is like people who seek those real experiences, and the kind of, maybe they're not as polished, but maybe something crazy and improvisational happens. People who seek those experiences, they're not the ones going to these big EDM festivals or whatever it is. They're still going to the warehouses. Like,
it's true.
That scene is going to exist as long as people want that. So like, it's almost as if this mainstreamification of DJ culture exists separately.
You're completely right. I mean, and it is a different audience. People are there for different reasons.
It's more like normal people, like less... I don't want to say less music fans, but like people who enjoy music more casually or more commercially, even. Like they're not necessarily going out of their way to like buy music or find music.
And that's the thing. I think that's probably where people get so fired up about it, is because the people who do get angry are the ones who spent their whole lives digging for this, and and then all of a sudden it's just in front of everybody else, and it almost seems too easy. But you're completely right. It's two different things.
That's maybe the only part of it that gets me a little bit riled, is like when that sort of mainstream culture starts sapping from the underground culture and ruining it. Essentially, it's like
Yeah.
I'm really scared for Jersey club music at the moment. Like,
Yeah, I was just thinking about that.
it's teetering. It's just like, where is it going to go? Like, are we going to be able to keep this thing pure, or is it going to totally be ruined?
Well, I completely agree. And then the question is, for the authentic Jersey club, for the originators, the people who really deserve the recognition for it, how to get them that recognition, and is it even possible? Because it's one of those things throughout music history, stuff like this has happened, right? Where somebody from the mainstream sees something cool in the underground, kind of takes it, does whatever they do to it, packages
make all
it
the
up.
money, yeah.
Right. And I think you're completely right that is kind of where Jersey Club is heading right now.
It is one of those, like, if you know things, though.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm trying to think of a historical example where it's like Elvis and
I was just about to say
B.B.
Elvis.
King or something.
Yeah.
And it's like, the more time goes on, the more people are clued into what was actually happening there.
Right.
And I think, these things always out themselves.
You're completely right. And I think as artists, all we can really do is just shine a light and,
Yeah, speak about it. Or like, I think the worst thing you can do is be like, this is bullshit, like, da-da-da-da-da.
Right.
These are the originators, like, because people don't speak in that language anymore. It's, particularly in America, it's like, well, there's a good thing that I always say, which is, in the UK, there's having money and there's being cool. And they're different things. But in America, having money is being cool.
Right.
And like, that conversation over here is like, I don't care, they sold 1 million records, like, they're successful.
Right, yeah.
But,
and there's nothing else you can say after that.
There's a lot more like purism in the UK. So it takes longer over here, I think, for people to sort of clue in. But we're definitely in a time when information's so available, and like, those things will out themselves much quicker.
Yeah. And I mean, there are amazing Jersey artists doing awesome shit right now, in the current age too. Like, do you know Unique?
Yeah.
Yeah, she's killing it.
Yeah.
She just put out a new record that I've been really obsessed
so
with.
good.
And all the like Slink and Natus and all those guys.
Yeah, PayPal.
Oh man, I love those dudes.
And the other one is Footwork, like that new RP Boo record, and like,
yeah,
it's so good, and it's so in its heyday.
Right, it's wild, man. I came up in Chicago, and so Footwork is like near and dear to my heart. And there's been a couple cycles of like, will it blow up, won't it blow up in the last 10 years?
Yeah.
And it really does seem like now more people than ever are kind of catching on.
I think I like Footwork because as music, literally speaking sonically, it's not very accessible, like to a normal person who doesn't, it's so closely tied to its context. It's the same with grime in the UK. Where it's like, as soon as an American person tries to make grime, you're missing what makes the genre. It's like someone who doesn't live in Chicago, who doesn't go to Footwork nights, making Footwork. It's
100%.
Like, why are you doing it then? It's
right.
Like, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, and it's, in the context we were talking earlier about translating cultural sounds to other places, both grime and Footwork are so tied to where they come
they're
from.
Geographical.
It's really hard for them to translate.
And it makes it so that those scenes stay so pure and so great for music lovers, but it also means that they never, or quite often they don't cross over successfully.
Or blow up.
There's been a couple of cycles in the UK where grime has been like huge, and there's been #1 grime albums, like, but as soon as that happens, people they can smell the shit and they just go off it for a while.
Well, I remember when Drake, put out the album with all the grime dudes on it, and everyone over here was like, oh, this is it. Grime's about to break in the U.S. I was like, nah, man, that's not how this works.
Grime breaking in the U.S. it never will.
Right,
like,
yeah.
It won't.
It's an impossibility.
It can't, which is a good thing and a bad thing.
Right. But yeah, I think all we can do is just celebrate it. Again, I'm glad we're talking about this. Well, and for you, coming up in Guernsey, being fairly isolated, it sounds like, how did you discover these sounds in the first place? Like, what was the filter that they came into your life? all through the internet?
Yeah, internet. Video games actually played a big part of this, like all the EA games that have all the soundtracks.
Sure.
Need for Speed, like SSX, like all those, like FIFA. And,
Sure, yeah. I remember like Tony Hawk turned me on to a bunch.
Tony Hawk like got me into like Offspring and
yeah.
things like that. I think it was, my life has always been just soaking things in from different contexts because I'm from such a strange place.
And so you were starting to produce while you were still living there?
Yeah. I think the Mura Masa SoundCloud started existing 2014, I want to say, 2015.
Okay. And then it was what, like a year or so until you dropped Lotus Eater, which was at least the first time I heard of you.
Yeah, that was, I mean, it's interesting because that mixtape, Soundtrack to Death, was like the first full body of work that I put out. But before that, I was just doing that SoundCloud thing where you make a cool idea, you just prop it up. Like,
right, almost more like a demo.
Yeah, or just, it was more of a community vibe. Like, I felt some friendly competition, like with like Sam Galatry and like Kate Janada and like the Selection guys. And there were these different cliques that were all sort of saying, without saying any words, they were saying sonically like, hey, look at this, like, look at what we're doing. Like,
yeah.
And I felt like a big part of that. But then I was like, I need to translate this into real world music.
Right.
And that was Soundtrack to Death, which had Lotus Eater on it. Yeah, but before that point, it was a good like year and a half, 2 years of just like uploading on SoundCloud, like getting a bit of blog love, like building a following slowly. Like I didn't have a manager for 2 or 3 years.
How did you, once you dropped that first, would you call it an album, an EP?
I always call it a mixtape.
Mixtape, yeah.
Or like a beat tape even. Like it's not, there's
right.
there's no songs on there. Like
sure. Is that when you started getting more of that business attention, from labels or managers or any of that kind of thing?
I mean, just before that dropped, I met my now manager, Sam Stubbings, who also manages Neo and Kosher, Tom Tripp, a lot of the people I've done records with,
right.
Jay Duhart. And he didn't want to do anything. He just wanted to say, look, I'm here, I'm on standby. If you have bigger picture visions, just let me know and we'll see what we can do. Like he lent me money to buy a new laptop when my one busted. Like he was just sort of there as a little cushion, like at first. And I was like, I want to do vinyls for this because it feels like it belongs on vinyl or whatever. And he helped me with that.
So you were taking it pretty seriously even back then, huh?
Not in terms of like, I want to be a super capitalist to make lots of money.
Right.
But just in terms of like, how do we execute this as properly as possible?
Yeah, that's kind of what I meant. More looking at it as, not as I'm an amateur,
But not for the sake of business, but for the sake of art.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
Where it's like, I designed the packaging and I talked about the type of cardboard we wanted to print the vinyl on and that sort of thing. Like I was taking it seriously in that sense, but I had plans to go to university. I wasn't going to, do it.
Oh, that's interesting. What did you think you were going to be doing?
I don't know. I don't think I ever knew, but I was doing English literature and philosophy, which is like a double liberal arts degree, which is nothing, such a nothing thing. I'm glad I got out after the first year and didn't get into huge debt.
Right. And how did you, or when did you move away from Guernsey and what prompted that?
It was for university.
Okay.
I moved to a place called Sussex, which is right.
Oh, in Brighton?
Yeah, next to Brighton.
I lived in Brighton for a few weeks, man. I love that place.
It's vibrant.
Yeah.
And like, it's the opposite from where I was from. It's like totally liberal, like very left wing. It's the only place in the UK where the Green Party won.
Oh, okay. Yeah, and it's sort of like the queer capital of the UK
it's very
too.
queer
right?
and like just very, there's a lot of people there trying to make art and like that was super healthy for me. I did my first show there, first Mura Masa show.
What was that like? the first one?
It was at a place called the Green Door Store, which is underneath Brighton train station. It's like it used to be at horse stables.
Oh, wow.
It's like 150 cap, 200.
Yeah.
And it was sold out. And yeah, it was great. I think it was great.
Yeah.
There's a video of it somewhere.
As long as you had a good time, man.
Yeah. But it was like, that was the translation, as we say in the UK, bums on seats. Like, does it put tickets?
Right.
Do people
URL to IRL.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's that translation.
That's so wild, though, to go, to have the first show you do as Masa to sell out, coming from where you're from, where, that must have been a crazy feeling to be so detached from, sort of like you said, like butts in the seat, like just the reality of the business. Then all of a sudden, the first thing you do on the mainland sells out.
But I think it was to speak in a business sense. It was a combination of like dropping the mixtape, getting a few bits of radio play, like just slowly building this momentum, and then just putting the show on at the right time, just exposing it at the right time. And then from there, we would just do that over and over again, climbing up the ladder, like, because it was never going to be like I was never going to have like a number one suddenly and then,
Right.
So yeah, it was just about being clever and just sort of not overplaying our hand and that sort of thing.
Which is, and all of that makes total sense and is all really good advice for any aspiring artist listening. But to me, it's just really impressive that you were doing this all at a young age. I think most young artists just don't have that kind of business sense naturally,
I guess, yeah, it is business sense, but like the way I was thinking about it at the time was just like, how do we make this art feel important? Like, how do we make the music matter? And it's like, well, you want to sell the show out. And like, so you work backwards from there. It's like, how do we sell it out?
Sure.
Like,
all the little things that go into that.
Yeah, it starts with like, what Sam, my manager, always says is like, how do we get the most people to hear this? And that doesn't mean like, let's do all the shitty promo, let's do all the fucking scraping the barrel as far as like putting yourself out there. It just means like, you have to keep that in mind. It's like, you want the most people to hear the music that you can. Wherever possible, without compromising,
Yeah, of course. Yeah, that makes total sense. And did you have context for what you were doing at that point? Because I would imagine when you would first come to Brighton, probably you hadn't seen a lot of your quote unquote competitors or, anyone even in the same area of what you were doing.
I think that really, without me knowing it, I would have been ignorant to it at the time, but I think that really played to my strength, which was just like, who's this person like who's come out of nowhere and is just doing something strange?
Sure,
like,
and I think probably there's an argument to be made that had you had more context, maybe it would have
worse.
affected what you did, right?
Exactly. And the times where I look back and I've been like, if I've made a decision based off what somebody else is doing or what I think I should be doing based on them, it's always been the wrong thing, or it's not been the best decision I could have made. And that's so cliche, and it's such hard advice to follow as well, because it's like...
But we've all been there, man. I've definitely been there.
It's the best advice in the world you can give is just... But it's also the hardest to follow, which is just stop. Just do it.
Yeah.
Just stop thinking about all this context and stuff, and just think about what it is that you want to do, and then facilitate that, and then... people are on board.
Yeah, that tunnel vision can be really an asset sometimes.
Yeah, and I think I was lucky that I had that being growing up isolated. Yeah.
How much do you think, I was just talking to Chromeo about this, and we were talking about how much the actual physical place you're making music affects, the sound and the style. Because they just bought, for context, they just got this studio complex out in Burbank in California. And they really did it up. Like, it looks like a 70s studio. It's like a very Chromeo building. So, everything is all brown woods. And, it just looks like a studio from the 70s. Very in their style.
I can see that.
And I was talking to them about it, and I was like, man, this must have really been cool to record in for you guys. And what they said was, for them, they were like, yeah, it was great. But honestly, I think we could do this anywhere.
Yeah.
And for you, do you think, in those early years, either in Guernsey or in Brighton, that where you were really colored your sound? Or do you think it more came from somewhere inside you?
I think this question has changed now. The answer to this question is very different from 10, even like 5 years ago, because where I felt I was making the music was on the internet.
Oh, okay.
I felt like that was the place, that was the context.
Right.
Even though it's not physically where I was.
That's where you were living, though, in a way, right?
Yeah, that's where my head was. That's where I was interacting with this scene. And like, if I was in a DIY band in the 70s and I was hanging around CBGBs, that's where I would have been making the music, so to speak. Or, so yeah, I felt like in that way, it didn't matter if I was on a train going from Brighton to London or like back home almost. I was kind of always making it for the same context. But now I'm struggling with that a little bit because I'm at the point where I need to mature my sound a little bit. Like it's been a few years now focused on this one aesthetic.
Right.
And I'm having trouble like finding a new home kind of. I almost need to like uproot my current internet abode and like go somewhere
throw
else.
out some of the old conventions.
Yeah, find a new Tumblr.
Right,
that sort of thing.
I like that. Well, yeah, and I think it's interesting, I was listening back to your back catalog when I knew I was coming to talk to you, and I think we mentioned earlier, it's a wide variety of sounds and styles, but there are some, there's like almost like a delicate quality to a lot of the sounds you use, I think. And when you said that in Guernsey there was like a folk music sort of thing running through it, I get that in a lot of your music in a sense. And it's an interesting question to try to think about how to keep what makes you unique but still evolve.
Yeah, I've been thinking about this a lot lately. One thing that I've decided is I was having a long chat to Flume about this, Harley, because we were racking our brains like what gives a producer their identity? Like, is it a certain sound that they use? Is it a type of sample? Is it to do with the technique, like how they're actually producing? And the conclusion we came to was like, unless you're singing, unless you're using words and your voice, it's very hard to find an identity.
Yeah.
And like, really what it is about writing music that comes out as being uniquely you, man, this is a long sentence, is you can't help what comes out,
Right.
And that's the thing that's always going to mark you, is like that's that thing that you do that you can't help but do, that you don't even know.
Sure, yeah.
And that's helped me to just sort of relax and be loose with it a little bit.
Yeah, and just trust that what's coming out of you is going to be unique.
And like, yeah, that's not to say you shouldn't think about your ideas and whether they belong to your project or what, but I find the only time that you make stuff that doesn't suit you is when you're trying to be someone else.
Sure, yeah. When you have started singing a little bit, right?
Yeah. Loosely. But I don't want to, that wasn't for the sake of like putting me at the center of the project. It was just like, it was another instrument, another experimental thing.
Are you comfortable with people seeing you as the center? Do you like,
I think maybe secretly I like it.
Yeah.
As all performers.
I mean, of course, we all have that part of us.
But I also, I just always fancied myself as the Rick Rubin or the Kevin Parker.
Sure, the guru in the back.
Yeah, it's like most people don't even know what you do, but the people who do know really respect you for it.
Sure, yeah. I always think that's funny when you see people, like I was just randomly, I rewatched some like Diplo and somebody were on one of the late night shows performing a song, and he's just kind of in the back holding a bass,
just there,
just standing
swaying
there. Like I'm not sure he was even playing it.
If you know, you know.
Right, exactly. But yeah, it's one of those funny things, man. So once you got to Brighton and you started playing out, and it seemed like things took off pretty quickly, from a macro view of things. And tell me if I'm wrong here, but did you start, touring around and building up pretty quickly after that first show?
No, not really. I mean, there was kind of a specific rollout that we had in mind, which was come up with a live show, like find a way to perform this music live, and then sort of build an audience through the music rather than touring extensively.
Sure.
So after that Brighton show, I think I did one show in Belgium for Red Bull with like Tucky Monster or something, almost just for practice.
Yeah.
And then after that, I'm pretty sure it was like my first London headline, which would have been at a place called Electroworks.
Okay.
And that was sort of with a view to wowing some labels, some investors.
You guys are being very strategic about it.
Yeah, me and Sam would get together very often and sort of talk about the best way to approach this, but always with a view to translating this internet thing, like this following that I had, into real music loving kind of fans.
Right.
Because I saw that coming like miles away, and you see it now, like those kids who are around at the same time as me on SoundCloud are still on SoundCloud.
Oh, sure.
They can't sell tickets.
And I mean, you look at there's artists that exist solely on Spotify.
Exactly.
Now. There's artists with tens of millions of streams who couldn't sell 10 tickets. It's bizarre.
And there's people in the UK especially who've had #1 records, and then you go and see them at a festival, it's empty. And that is, I really just didn't want that to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's smart, man. And, it's interesting because you've always, it seems, been very collaborative, always worked with a wide assortment of people. How do you translate that to a live show? Do you end up touring with a lot of collaborators?
No, and this is most of my time with the live show is just spent problem solving.
Yeah.
And like
working backwards.
Well, it's like we're basically trying to invent some new paradigm for electronic music, which is like a live show. And there's a couple of people, like Disclosure, Flume, trying to think, Odessa maybe.
Sure.
I don't really know a lot about that Odessa project, but I guess it's something similar to what I do live.
Yeah, and you see more people moving towards that now.
Yeah.
Like, I think a lot of people are trying to figure it out.
But the motivation is wrong.
Right.
It's just like, because for me, it's like, I don't want to pay for a headline show and see a guy stood behind some decks, clapping his hands, doing this. I don't want to pay a ticket fare to see that.
Right.
If I'm going to a night in a club, that's all I want to see. Like,
yeah, right. You
I want to
keep
dance.
It separate.
I want to, yeah. But there's this weird thing that's happened with the whole DJ mainstreamification, which is now you go to a show to see a DJ, and it's like you should be going to a club to dance. The DJ is the one curating the club night. Yeah,
it's a bizarre thing. I mean, I'm a DJ, and this boom has benefited me, but I still feel...
We didn't even talk about that yet, how it's a great thing that's happened.
Right.
I don't mean to be all negative about it.
No, not at all. I feel the exact same way as you, because even when I'm up there performing, sometimes I feel weird because I'm like, this actually could be more fun for everybody here if just a few elements were kind of changed around.
Yeah, well, like, it's funny when if you're DJing in a venue that's sort of traditionally like a live space, you can feel the disconnect, where it's like, I'm too high up here, or like the roof is too high. Like there's not, when you're in XOYO in London and you're hitting your head on the roof and it's like smoky and everybody is just there to dance.
Right.
You really feel that, and it benefits. You could play the exact same set, but just in a different room. Like, have you read How Music Works? David
I have,
Burns?
yeah.
When he talks about, picking the venue for the type of music and that sort of thing, I think people need to think about that a lot more with DJs nowadays. But it's all about fitting as many people in the room, and there's a lot of elements, I guess.
Well, how do you see what you do? Do you think of yourself as making club music? Do you think of yourself as making pop music? Do you worry about it at all?
I think this period I've taken to calling it season 1.
Okay.
That's my thing now.
Yeah. Shout out to Kanye.
Yeah. Oh, I guess I hadn't even thought about that. That's what he'd have done.
Yeah. A little bit.
This part of my musical life, this introduction to me, was all about pop music, and it was all about twisting what that means, and like exploring that connection between underground music and mainstream music, and how really they're the same, and it's all just about where you expose it or the context. It happens to be dance music also. I don't know how that's happened or why,
right.
But like I find myself in this circle of electronic music, which is great.
Yeah. I think part of that is the UK influence, man. The UK has always been really good about figuring out a balance between dance and pop and underground and mainstream in a way that the US never really was. Yeah.
I mean, nowadays, like dance music is pop music in the US.
Oh, no, it's true. I mean, the EDM wave, like you can hear those influences in the biggest pop singles, even if they're not, a quote unquote dance song.
Yeah. I think people are getting back more now. There was a period of like 3 or 4 years there where it was like, there's like the verse and then the hook and then there's like a drop, which is like not lyrics or melody, but it's the production that's sort of driving.
Right.
And now people are going back to songwriting, and like someone I really like is Camila Cabello, because like those are just songs. Like they don't have big drops.
Yeah. You can play them on a guitar and just sing them,
And I like that craft. Or like Ariana, like it's all going back that way to Lord, great songwriting.
Sure.
And women as well, great women songwriters.
Yeah, thank God. We need more of that, man.
More female energy.
That's been an issue in the dance music world for a long time.
I've had all female supports on this US run for that reason.
That's sick, man.
And like, I didn't want it to feel pandery or like, I was doing them a favor or something.
No, not at all. But I think that's just the way to do it, is just do it because it's cool.
Just put them on, like
just do it. And that's the thing. Like we can talk about it here and acknowledge that should be happening more often. But I think that's really how the problem gets solved, is just artists taking responsibility, putting on for what you want to see.
Definitely.
Yeah, man.
There's a great techno label called Disc Woman. Have you come across them?
I know the name, but I don't know much about it.
It's all women. All of them are women. All the people who run it are women. It's just women. And that is so great, and I follow them so closely just to see that happening.
Right.
Because it's like dance music is such a white male space.
Oh man, it's rough.
And it shouldn't be. Like, no. Because
it's not where it comes from.
Yeah.
It's not where the roots of it are.
And like, yeah, it's just good to see something like that happening. Anyway, I don't want to get too preachy.
We'll get off our soapbox. But yeah, I'm right there with you, man. Well, and another thing I wanted to ask you about is, in those early years when you first put out the EP after the mixtape, you started your own label kind of right around that time, right? Which is another interesting thing, another like example of that really good foresight that I keep bringing up. Because to me, the way it works for a lot of artists is, you just cross your fingers and hope that a label picks you up at the start. And then eventually you end up making your own label once you've kind of gone through the system. What was the thinking for you? How did you come to just right off the bat starting your own label?
It comes back exactly what I've been talking about when we speak about all these sort of business decisions that are sort of rooted in just art, which is the question or the problem was, how do I retain creative control? How do I make it so that it's still mine, the work? And the answer to that is you create your own space where you can make it. And the solution to that happens to be running your own label. As I do it currently, it's as an imprint of a major label. So like...
Right. So you can use their resources. But,
it's a buffer. It's like a creative wall. Like they still have money-making, decision-making power, but the creative side of it is entirely on the other side of this wall where I am with the label. Yeah.
And I would imagine the major label connection must help sometimes too when you're reaching out to bigger collaborators and that sort of thing. I could see the advantage of having them involved,
Less so than I thought.
Really?
Yeah. A lot of these things come about organically, weirdly.
I mean, those are the best usually.
Yeah, but Yeah, when they sell you the major label dream, they put on like it's this. Oh yeah, we can reach out to Kanye tomorrow,
right? Yeah.
But really, like when you get to such a level, they're not even talking to their labels, so the connection is irrelevant. It's
that's interesting to think because I mean, take the example of Kanye. I'm sure he's not listening to a record label person, you know.
And like he has his own team around him. If they like you, they'll reach out to you.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting. So, how did you start reaching out to some of the bigger collaborators? What were, was there one person who kind of like, worked with you and then things got easier to get in touch with people?
Rocky.
Yeah.
Yeah. He was the first one who took a punt on me and was like, you know what? I'm a AAA star celebrity and I will bestow upon you this feature.
Well, and I mean, that Lovesick, that song, I was aware of you for a long time before that, but then it was like in another stratosphere. I don't know if you had that same experience, but...
It really helped. But also it was like, it wasn't just, the question wasn't, how can we make me more famous?
Right.
It was like, well, really it became, the EP had been out for like a year and a half. And Lovesick Fuck was the instrumental version which was on there. And along with Firefly and, those two ended up being on the album. And the question was like, Lovesick never had its moment in the sun. It was like, it's a really good idea and we need to find a way to resurface it here. What's the solution? And I was like, at first, people around me was like, they were saying, let's do a campaign around it. Let's put it back out. Let's maybe do a music video. Like, let's just re-energize it. And I was like, well, we have to make it different musically so that there's a reason for it to reappear. And I was like, well, it's a hip hop beat. Let's put a rapper on it. And then the conversation was like, who's the rapper on it? And then there was 3 people. It was like, I think it was Childish Gambino. If Rihanna wanted to do it, she could do it. And then it was Rocky. And then
I feel like if Rihanna wants to do it, she can kind of always do it.
Oh, yeah. That's just a permanent... But imagine me at that time saying those 3 people just like, if it's not these people, I don't care. Like, but you have to do that, especially with in the A&R culture. Because most people, when they say those 3 names, they'll get back people 4 rungs down the ladder. Right. And then maybe they'll settle on something or they'll be suggested something and get sold on it. But I've always just been like, if it's not Kanye, if it's not Rihanna, if it's not Beyonce, like...
Well, that's just that strength of vision, right? I mean, it sounds like your whole career, you've kind of known what you wanted.
Yeah. Well, it's like a bargaining technique. It's just like, go in super high. Right. Like, we want Post Malone. Like, if you can't get him, then we'll do another song. Like, and Rocky happened to have already heard the instrumental and he was just like, fuck it, yeah, I'll do it. Yeah. So it's just one of those things, like a moment.
Were you in the studio with him?
Yeah. And that was the first time I'd been in the studio, like with a big person like that. So we were trying to impress him. So we rented Abbey Road, which is the Beatles studio.
That'll do it.
And we were in the Beatles room as well, Studio 2, with the little back door where Paul McCartney sneaks in.
Right. Wow.
And it's like it's basically an orchestra room. So it's like huge, but we just had Rocky in the middle with a little microphone.
Oh, that's very cinematic.
It was great. That. I wish we'd have filmed it. I cannot believe. I don't think we wanted to risk the whole shit. Like we were just like, get in, get the thing, get out.
Right, of course.
And we were only in for like a couple of hours and we spent most of it talking about Tame Impala. But
great.
Yeah, he freestyled basically that whole thing and then I went home and stayed up for hours like making it into verses and things like that. It was really cool.
Man. And did you feel like after that like the perception of you changed or did anything get easier? Did the shows get bigger?
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely like, it was a really healthy cosign because it wasn't like, oh, that's Rocky's kid, or like, that's the kid who works with Rocky.
Right.
It was
you weren't a protege.
Yeah, because I already had this sort of body of work. So all it was doing was serving to draw attention to me, like not through Rocky, but ultimately because of him.
Sure. And then, I mean, obviously, you went on to work with a lot of other amazing collaborators. You dropped your album in 2017.
Yeah,
right?
it's been just over a year since it came out.
And that was, I mean, fantastic album, and I think generally well received. I mean, you got some Grammy nominations off of it.
As an art director as well.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing too.
Yeah.
Which now that I hear you talking about the different kinds of cardboard back in the day, it makes a lot of sense.
Well, that sleeve took ages. I wish I had one with me so I could show you. But the limited edition one, have you ever seen that? It has like this.
No, I haven't seen it.
It has a holographic version of the artwork on the front of it.
Oh, no shit.
Changes when you swivel it. Yeah. There's no text on it. It's just all embossed.
Oh, man.
So and it's really special.
That sounds beautiful.
And then the CD is like the see-through jewel case, and you can see the CD. Like
right.
It took so long. I was working with this guy, Matt DeYoung, he's previously done the XX, and he was a really good influence.
Right. Well, and so for the listeners who may not know, you were nominated for a Grammy not only as an artist but as a creative director. Is that what?
Yeah,
that's the term for
creative direction
or artistic direction. Whatever it was, but that's really rare, right? Or has that ever happened?
I'm the first person who's been nominated for both in the same year, I think.
Yeah.
Or on the same album or something.
It's pretty amazing, man. I mean, I have such mixed feelings about giving awards in general.
Me too.
How did it feel to get the nomination? I mean, obviously flattering, but did it really mean something to you, or was it more just kind of, a nice acknowledgement?
Yeah, I'd say it was more just like a nice thing. And I knew what it meant in terms of portfolio, like it is a big deal. And I was never like dismissive of it or anything like that. But it was like, I had always seen people like Frank Ocean snubbing the Grammys, and I always just thought like, come on, man. Like, it's an institution. Like, just, just go to the thing, wear a suit or whatever. But then when I got nominated, I found myself in this position of like, how much do I care about this? Like, the Chainsmokers cleaned up.
Right.
And it's just like, I don't care about that. So why do I care about me being involved in this? But like, it was just a trippy experience. Yeah,
well, and maybe that even then leads the question of, it gets, and tell me if I'm wrong, but, for me, it would get in my head of like, where do I fit in? Like, am I the Chainsmokers competition? Like that kind of thing.
I mean, I lost to Kraftwerk.
So you can't really complain about that.
It was like, if I'm going to lose to someone, it has to be the people who invented electronic music.
Yeah, that's fair, man. Did you go to the Grammys?
I did, yeah. I went with Kosha, actually, who did Nuggets with me. She used to be called Bonsai.
Right.
I went with her and Sam, my manager, and Matt DeYoung, who did the artwork with me.
Oh, beautiful.
It was... There's a pre-ceremony that's like 3 hours where they do like best non-Latin orchestral album featuring a vocalist.
Right.
And like that was where my shit was.
Yeah.
And then there's like the TV one where James Corden's cracking jokes.
Of course.
See Rihanna.
Well, I remember, it's funny because I became aware of that more so a few years back when Skrillex won whatever Grammy he won.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
And I remember, our whole community was so stoked on it, and I was watching the live stream or whatever it was, and he won, and my feeds, the internet went crazy, and then I was watching the thing, and there were like 10 people in the room. It was such a low key.
That's funny.
Such an odd contradiction.
Yeah, it's like Paul Schaefer hosted this year, and it just felt a bit like. Chat showy.
Right, yeah.
It was funny.
That's so funny.
And it's over so quickly, especially if you lose. Because it's like, your thing comes up, they say the name, and then you didn't win, and then you sat there.
Move on, go back to the bar.
It's mad. It was really fun. At the party afterwards, it was like, Erykah Badu was DJing, and then Dave Chappelle walked in, and then sat next to Quincy Jones, and it was all very like,
that's the perfect experience then.
Yeah. That was almost the best part.
Yeah, man. It's always, I feel like, just the people who show up for those kind of things.
Yeah. It's fun.
Well, and you, speaking of Skrillex, you actually ended up in the studio with him for one of your more recent singles, which was Complicated, right?
Yeah.
How did that come about?
That was a weird story, especially for me, because like up till this point, I've always been a production purist. Like I do all of it. I mix it, like whatever, like that's my thing. But with this one, it was Sonny had been in with Neo, who sings on the track, and they'd written this idea together, and they kind of shelved it. Like it was a rough idea, but it was amazing. Like it's basically as it is now, song-wise, lyrics and melody and stuff. And they'd shelved it. It wasn't quite right for Sonny's project. It wasn't right for Neo's project. And I heard it by chance somewhere. And I was like, what the hell is happening with this song? We need to do this. And so very kindly, they both let me kind of drag it into my world a little bit. And it was a very different working experience from normal in that I already had the skeleton of a thing to work with.
Do you, now having done that, do you prefer kind of just starting from a blank page?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think so. But with this, it's such a good song. And it suits my project so much that I was just like, who cares how this came around? Like,
no, 100%.
It's so special. And it was really cool being able to work with Sonny because that's like, it's like the Nile Rodgers of
he's
EDM.
Incredible, man.
He's so talented.
It's bizarre how talented he is. Yeah. And he's so open to the whole thing with him is always kind of blowing me away.
He's great.
Did you learn anything in particular, or did you take anything away from that experience with him?
He taught me so many Ableton keyboard shortcuts that I didn't know. He just watching him mix like EQ and that sort of thing, I learned like a shit ton, even from like 10 minutes, because he's just a sonic like powerhouse.
Right.
And it made my mixes better. Like when it came to the next, after I'd seen him work, I sent a song off to Lex, the guy who mixes my stuff, and he was like, you got this pretty far, this time. And I was like, that's because I've been hanging around with Sonny. Like,
yeah. I mean, I think just on some nerd shit, that's maybe the best part of collaborating with other producers is just the little things you pick up from watching the way they do their thing. Yeah. Because production, for most of us, we all kind of put it together hodgepodge just from whatever source we, whatever backwards way we started doing it.
I have a funny story about this, which is one of the first times I met Harley Flume. He was like, oh, do you mind if I take a look at the project for Lovesick? And I was like, go ahead, man. Like, there's no secrets.
Good luck. Yeah.
There's no secrets in that project. And he opened it up and he was like, is this like the stems or like, he was like, where's the rest of it? There's only like 16 tracks here. And I was just like, that's all of it. Like, there's only a few things going on. And he's like, you just got a limiter on the master and like everything's just compressed to shit and like nothing's EQ'd. And I was just like, this is how it is, man. It just sounds good that way. So
is that the way you work often? Is just a few elements? Yeah,
like everybody always, other producers who look at my products always freak out a little bit. They're just like, how is there so little? Like, where does it all come from?
Yeah,
like,
of course.
But I've learned over time. That's my steez.
Hey, no. Whatever works, man. And I think you've been very good throughout your career up to this point about sticking to your guns, I think.
Yeah.
I
don't know why. I should probably open myself out more.
Well, it's always a balance, right?
True, yeah. Live and learn.
Sure. Just a couple questions before we wrap up, one of which is related to what we were just talking about, kind of maintaining your own sound and collaborating, is that I was reading you've also worked on some other artist projects. Ariana Grande at some point.
That's a funny story. Basically, like one of her songs off of her album before last was extremely similar to Firefly. And there was a whole drama got kicked up about it. And a lot of death threats for me that day.
Right.
Because I foolishly tweeted something about like, no, it wasn't me, like sipping the tea or...
Right.
And it was so silly. And
Did her
like,
fan base just come for you?
oh, for days, like just phone blowing up. Like I got really upset about it, which I probably shouldn't have, but like, yeah, that was a mistake. So yeah, not Ariana.
Yeah, okay, fair enough.
I'd love to do something for her, but that time it wasn't.
Yeah, I
me.
could see it happening down the road. But, well, okay, how about Chic then?
Yeah, that's true. That was this year. Yeah.
Right, yeah, just recently. And maybe just describe what happened a little bit. And I'm curious from a nerdy standpoint about if, working on somebody else's vision was enjoyable, or if you did anything differently than you would have done for yourself.
So part one of that question is I met Nile Rodgers at the Ivor Novello Awards, which is like a big songwriting awards thing. Just randomly, like, and he said that he really liked Lovesick and he liked my stuff, and he was working on this new album with lots of collaborators. And I was like, fuck yeah, I'm down, like, whatever. And he'd already written kind of the loose song with Anderson .Paak and Bruno Mars, but it was all very like shiny EDM kind of production.
Yeah.
So I just said to him, like, as a 21-year-old, like, the reason people love Chic is because it's classic, like classic sounding. And like, to answer the second part of the question, I was just thinking about like what my contribution could be, or like what I could bring to this. And in that case, it was the stripping back part of it, where it was like, what's great about Chic, there's 5 instruments, it's disco, it's like, it's simple, it's classy, the hook comes at the start, like that sort of thing. So yeah, we just worked very closely on it, I guess.
Yeah, that's great, man. And did you find that rewarding in a way that working on your own stuff isn't, or did you enjoy it in a different way?
Yeah, well, it's funny because a lot of ego gets removed because you kind of have the privilege of being commissioned for something.
Sure.
You don't have to worry as much about what it says about you.
Sure. Yeah, I find in those kind of situations, in a way, I can almost be more efficient because I'm not questioning my decisions so much.
It's a lot quicker to work, isn't it? It's just, you're not thinking
in a weird way, because it's so bizarre that you can see what would work for somebody else almost better than what would work for you.
Yeah.
I guess that goes back to what we were talking about. How do you evolve your sound and all that?
Yeah.
But
it's funny, like, because Nile Rodgers is such an icon. It's almost like, what can you bring?
Right,
like,
of course. What doesn't he know?
Yeah, but it's it's all just about collaboration.
100%, man. I think that's a really good way to wrap everything up. Before we go, I should say, what's coming up for you? What should people be looking out for? And do you have plans for the next year, the next couple of years? Like, where are you taking it at this point?
Left. I'm taking it left.
Nice.
Going weird. Because the obvious thing to do after you make a pop album is try and build on it, try and improve it.
And I'm sure you have people in your ear telling you to do that.
Well, to an extent, like, obviously they want me to do well. They want me to preserve momentum and, enjoy my moment that I'm having.
Yeah.
But I just feel in my heart, it's just like I have to do something for the culture or whatever, where it's just like we do something really weird. It's a singular moment, and then we move on. Like, so yeah, I'm enjoying finding what that is at the moment.
That's awesome, man. Do you think it'll eventually take the shape of another album down the road?
Yeah, if not an album, then a long form thing of some kind, or even a live show that's, the music doesn't get released or something like that.
Oh, that could be cool.
Yeah, I feel like people haven't explored that really.
Yeah, that's actually a really interesting idea to make it a, sort of an exclusive thing.
Yeah, well, it's like you can't watch the Book of Mormon online.
Yeah, that's a perfect example.
You got to go and see that.
Yeah, you're right, man. I like that a lot. Well, this has been great, man. Is there anything else you want to get out before we get out of here?
No. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely,
I think I have to go and sound check.
Yeah, yeah, it sounds like a plan. Well, have a great show, man. Nice to talk to you.
Thank you.
All right, peace. All right, that's the show. Shout out to Mura Masa. Pleasure to have that conversation with you, man. I hope we can do that again sometime. Looking forward to hearing all of the new music, the new sounds. Don't forget to keep up with Mura Masa. Follow the links that are in the description of this episode. All the music, all the tour dates, all that good shit. My name is Willie Joy. Thank you for joining me. Yet another episode in the bag. Working on some really cool, little different things for this show coming up soon. But until then, you can always keep in touch with me at Willie Joy or at Back to Back Pod on all social media. Or you can just email me backtobackpod@gmail.com. That's it. That's all. That's everything for this week. I hope everyone out there has a great week. Whether you're listening to this at the gym, in the car, at home, wherever you're at, I appreciate you. Have a good one. Take care of yourself. And I will talk to you next week. For Back to Back, this is Willie Joy. Peace.